So I'm making a start on the stud work for the rear wall, and as you can see, I've got that one nearly complete, and I've just got to measure up this one. I'll have a small gap there, so where I've cut all these beams going up here to a set height, I've got little bits of offcut, which are these, so I will just cut one of these off to fill the gap and make another little frame with three uprights, or two uprights there. I've already pre-cut there all of the uprights, so they're all ready to go. Now when you're doing these bottom beams, I don't know if you can see there, I've marked off, you start at this end, and what I've been doing is you mark off at 16 3/4 and then put a line, put a little X this side, and that's the side the joist goes on. That gives you set spacing. Obviously the last one will be a bit narrower, and I'm using 2.4 lengths, so each of my wall sections is going to be 2.4, and then I'll bolt them together or screw them together once they're all in place along the back wall. So what I was going to show you here is make sure that all of these are lined up. That's hence why this piece of wood was here, so that they're all the same. So this is the first piece that I actually marked up. So we get our set square. I can't do this at the moment. You put it there, draw your line all the way across, so they're all the same, and the same there. And that way, when you put this beam here and then you put the next one up there, you'll have these lines, and you just line it up at the top with that line. So these are already marked up. I've got a bit of mud on there. So if I get this piece, put that like that, so when you screw these in, you need to make sure that this is lined up with that line there, and then they're pretty straight, and so on, and just screw them in. I'm using 80mm screws for the stud work here, and I'll be using 100mm screws to screw the stud work into the base. But this back wall is dead on 6 foot, and the reason this one's only 6 foot is because this wall at the front is going to be higher, so it's going to slope upwards, going obviously that way. And obviously we can't go too high, as there are limits on height restrictions before you have to get planning permission. So you need to look into that, and obviously there might be different for a different area where you live, and especially if you live in any sort of certain areas, you might need planning permission. So always check that out before you start building anything. So I shall get these finished, and hopefully I can get the back wall in place, or I'll just leave it over there at the moment at the back, and then I can start building the front wall, because obviously I want to get those walls done first before I do the side walls, because there's going to be a difference in angle which is going to be quite tricky to work out. So what we would do is get the back wall up there in place, get the front wall in place, and then we will draw out a plan on the floor of the difference in height, so we know where our beams, and we'll cut the beams to length to fit. But we'll get to that later on. So I shall crack on with this, hoping the wet stuff stays away today, and I'll see you soon. So where I'm at so far, well, the back wall is done in place, bolted down, and as you'll see, it's secured with some angled braces at the ends. That they serve two good uses: one to hold it all in place so it doesn't move around and break, and another one which we will come to in another video, And then I started the first of the wall sections. As you can see, there's a section there for the window, and that's it so far. So the back wall is up, as you know, and I've built most of the front walls as well, and they're all under there at the moment, out the way. And this is the first of the end walls. So how I did this, because bearing in mind that it's at an angle, or how it is, I sat the other wall up on this side and drew a line, which you probably can't see, but there's a pencil line just along the edge with this piece. And at this end, I marked the 6 foot from that corner, from my rear wall height. I put a bit of string going across. As you can see, hopefully you can see, there is a mark here. And I've put the string so that it goes across dead on. Then what I did was lay these top beams out and draw another pencil line down this edge. That way I could lay these down and then draw that line, take these away, put a piece of wood down, mark it off at the edge of that line so that it's dead to the right height. Did that all the way along, and then just fit the 2 top pieces. As you can see, I've got a couple of little windows which are going to go either end. They're opening ones, obviously, so that there's an airflow through. So I've got to cut the top piece of wood for framing that yet, and I've got to put all the supports in, the cross beam supports in across there yet, and then I'll be ready to do exactly the same at that end. And because there is a 1/2 inch difference, which isn't going to matter with the roof and the overhang and everything else, it's going to make no difference really, but there's about a 1/2 inch difference. So I was going to make them both on top of each other at this end, just make 2, but now I'm not going to do it that way. Although I may measure it up again up the other end and do something along those lines, because it'll be a lot easier to build it on top of this one, cut the same lengths. Anyway, that's the progress so far. I hope for tomorrow to have the walls will all be up. I'll have the outside insulated from weatherproofed even, and start putting the roof beams on. So we'll come back and show you some more once the rest of the walls are going up. So I wanted to add something to the video that I can't remember if I've actually mentioned or not. So when you're looking at sheds, looking at this thing, it's not old, it only has the uprights. It has none of these cross beams. Now when you're building a big shed like this, don't be fooled by looking at a smaller shed and thinking, I don't need these. What these do is, you've got to remember all the weight of the roof, which is going to be pretty heavy, is resting on these beams, and all that pressure is coming down these beams. And what will happen is, over time, they would start to bow outwards, and they would all start bowing, and then your roof would start to drop, and potentially these could snap. You could have all sorts of issues. What these cross beams do is they strengthen, so when the weight comes down here, instead of it bowing the wood, it spreads the weight outwards again and carries on down. The beam will not be able to bow. Again, that means that all the weight pressure then comes down to your bottom plate and gets spread outwards equally. So each one of these down beams spreads the weight from the roof down to the bottom beam, which spreads the weight around to the floor base. So They are a must. You must not build something this big without these. You would have a lot of problems in the future. So I just thought I'd mention that one, because I didn't want someone to come along and build something like this, spend all this money, and then miss out something like that just for a few quid of extra wood. So anyway, I'm nearly finished on this end wall now, but I'll see you all soon. So now I'm going to start putting the walls up, and then I've just got the end one to build. So that one's there ready. Now, as you can see, it's standing up quite nicely on its own because of that back plate that I've put there. I said it had two purposes, but be aware, I don't know if you can see it on the video, there's a gap down there where it's not flush up, but it's flush up the top. So we need to release that back plate so that we can move this back, because it's leaning forwards. So we need to release the back plate. So what we will do, or what I'll be doing, is taking these two screws out, leave this plate fixed in place, move this piece along. As you can see, it's flush. There's a big gap at the bottom. The bottom's not sitting in, so I need to loosen this off, push this up. Then when they're both flush, I'll probably tie this back on just temporarily while I bolt this in place. Obviously, before you bolt it in place, make sure it's flush to your edges as well, which it is on mine. And then I'll put this piece up. The brackets are there, so I'll put it in place nicely, flush up to this edge, screw it in along the bottom. Then when I've screwed it in on the bottom, I'll clamp this up here and down here to hold these two beams close together before screwing them together. I did the same on the joins over there as well. That's why they're nice and flush. So when you do clamp them, make sure that these top edges here are lined up flush together. So this piece comes dead flush with this, sorry, where they come flush together here, because otherwise you're going to have differences on the roof at the top. If these beams here are slightly misaligned, which, because a lot of these pieces are bowed, it might be, it's not a big deal if it's a couple of mil out, because when you put the boarding on, it's going to cover most of that, and you've got a plastic and cladding on the other side. So anyway, I shall get on with this, and I'll come back and show you once all these are up, or if there's anything else I think I need to mention about. You'll notice obviously the windows on the floor. That's the window space there. I will not be putting the window in yet. We're going to plastic sheet it once the walls are up all round, and the plastic sheeting will stay up in place for temporarily across the window area until I'm ready to start cladding, and that arrives on Friday. So it's currently Wednesday when I'm filming this, so I've got some boarding coming tomorrow for the roof, so I'll be doing that tomorrow, getting the roof finished, and then I can do the cladding, so on Friday, Saturday. But we're going to leave the windows out for now. We're not putting them in, not until later on. So, and that'll be apparent why as well later. Alright, I will see you shortly. So I've got the walls in, side wall in, the front wall, and the window spaces. I've just literally put this piece in here. I've got to put a cross beam and affix that, because that's not actually fixed yet, and build the end wall, which I shall be doing in a minute. Shouldn't take too long, and I'll show you when that's done, and we can move on to the next stage of the job. The walls are all in now. as you can see. I'm quite happy, everything's gone really well. And that's the end of all of the walling. That's that bit done.